Back in April, Megan hit her 35th birthday. Bright and early that morning, before the clock even struck 8, the doorbell started buzzing. I was hanging out in the kitchen, just nursing my first cup of coffee, so she went ahead and answered it herself. I heard her footsteps just stop dead in the hallway. Naturally, I walked out to see what the deal was. There she was, standing in the entry, clutching this massive bouquet of deep red roses. There wasn't a card or a name attached to them anywhere. Just a mountain of flowers and this tiny little envelope with her name scribbled on the front, but completely empty inside. By the look on her face, she was utterly clueless about who sent them. But honestly, her expression gave away something else, too. She had this smile on her face, the kind you only get when something makes you truly, genuinely happy from the inside out. It wasn't a shocked or startled kind of happy, just pure joy. When I asked her if she had a single clue who they were from, she just shrugged it off and claimed she didn't know a thing. I decided not to push it. People send flowers all the time, right? Could have been a buddy from work or just an old friend. It was her birthday, after all. But a few days down the road, I caught wind of something else. There was a brand new scent lingering in the house. This heavy, expensive, unfamiliar perfume was drifting over from her side of our bedroom. I didn't bring it up immediately. I just kept my eyes open and stayed observant. Then, one evening while she was in the shower, I decided to open up her nightstand drawer. Tucked away inside was a bottle of perfume I'd never laid eyes on before. No store receipt, no shopping bag, and she hadn't breathed a word about it to me. Now, she had proudly shown me every single other birthday gift she'd received that week. She raved about the chocolates from her sister, the gift card from her colleague, and the book her mom got her. She talked about all of them, but this bottle? Total silence. I set the bottle right back where it belonged and shut the drawer. Look, for 5 years straight, we had been pinching every single penny, throwing every spare dime we had directly at our mortgage. That one bottle of perfume easily cost more than our entire weekly grocery bill. Someone out there was showering my wife with gifts, and she was actively hiding it from me. What would you do in this situation? Would you confront her right then and there, or would you keep quiet and see how far it went? About 2 weeks after her birthday, Megan had to leave her car overnight at the mechanic because of some brake issues. She'd mentioned it the night before and asked if I could drive her into work the next morning. I told her it was no problem at all. When morning came, it was absolutely pouring buckets outside. It was one of those classic Houston downpours where the rain is so thick you can't see 10 feet ahead of you. We were both standing right by the front door, her holding her purse, me gripping my keys, when this car suddenly pulled up to the curb right outside our house. We both stared at it. Neither of us had ordered a ride. Megan stepped out onto the front porch to get a better look through the rain. The driver rolled down his window and called out her name. It wasn't a question either. He said it like he knew exactly where he was supposed to be. She glanced back at me for a split second, then told me she'd just take this ride, not to worry about it, and that she'd see me tonight. I just stood there in the open doorway, watching her hop into the passenger seat. That evening, I asked her what that was all about. She claimed she had no idea who called the car, guessing it was probably just someone at her office trying to be nice because of the terrible weather. She said it so casually, like anonymous taxis just magically show up at your doorstep every other week. I didn't press the issue, but I was analyzing every single word now, and what she was saying just didn't line up with reality. She wasn't confused by it. She wasn't even annoyed that some random stranger knew our home address. No, she had that exact same vibe she had with the roses. Completely relaxed, almost pleased, like a woman who was getting comfortable with being pampered. I didn't have a name yet, but I knew deep down that she knew exactly who it was. That Friday night, Megan casually mentioned that she had to head into the office on Saturday. Said it was an urgent project that couldn't wait until Monday morning. She threw it out there with that tone people use when they expect you to just accept it without a second thought. I just nodded and told her okay. But the thing is, she almost never worked weekends. In our 5 years together, I could count the number of Saturdays she worked on one hand. So the second those words left her mouth, a light bulb went off in my head. I didn't cross-examine her, and I didn't let on that my guard was up. I just listened, agreed, and started making a plan. Around noon on Saturday, I drove over to her office building. On the way, I stopped by that sandwich joint she loves on Kirby and picked up some lunch for her. That was going to be my alibi if she asked why I showed up out of the blue. Just a sweet husband bringing his wife a meal during a tough workday. When I pulled into the parking lot, there were only a handful of cars there, and hers was one of them. I walked right up to the building's entrance, but the door to her specific office suite was locked tight. It was dead silent inside. I walked back out to the lot and gave her a call, asking how the work was coming along and when she thought she'd be heading home. She told me she probably had another 2 hours or so, and told me not to wait up for her for dinner. Her voice was steady, totally normal. I walked back to my truck, drove it around the corner, and parked in a spot where I had a clear, unobstructed view of the parking lot exit. Then I waited. I sat there around that corner for about 2 long hours. A couple of cars drifted in and out, but nothing worth noting. Then, this sleek black car turned into the lot and idled right near the main entrance. It just sat there with the engine running, and nobody got out. 15 minutes ticked by. Suddenly, the driver's door popped open, and a man stepped out. As he walked around to the front of the hood, I got a solid look at his face. There was something incredibly familiar about him. I had definitely seen this guy somewhere before, but I just couldn't place him immediately. He walked over to the passenger side and opened the door, and Megan stepped out of the building. They stood there together for a moment right next to the car. Then, he reached out and took her hand. They looked into each other's eyes the way people do when they think the rest of the world isn't watching. And right then, it hit me. I knew exactly who he was. Julian Vance, her ex-boyfriend, the guy she had walked away from years ago when she chose to marry me instead. I'd seen his face somewhere recently, maybe on LinkedIn or in some local business journal. He had the kind of face that always ends up in the financial news. He was older now, a bit heavier, but it was absolutely him. I sat there in my truck with my hands gripping the steering wheel, and every single bizarre event from the past few weeks suddenly clicked into a perfect, devastating line. The roses, the secret perfume, the random ride in the pouring rain, and this urgent Saturday at the office. It was all him. My hands were shaking like crazy when I reached for my phone. I snapped a bunch of photos right through my windshield, making sure they were as sharp and clear as possible. I caught the two of them standing side by side, his hand wrapped around hers. I'd seen more than enough. I threw the truck into reverse, backed out of my hiding spot, and drove straight home. Megan walked through our front door about 30 minutes later. She kicked off her shoes, dropped her bag by the entryway, and complained about being completely wiped out. Said it was a grueling day with a mountain of paperwork to catch up on. Then she went straight into the bedroom. I sat down at the kitchen table, opened up my laptop, and typed his name right into the Google search bar. Julian Vance. The internet gave me the answers fast. He was the managing partner of a mid-sized hedge fund based right here in Houston. He'd made an absolute fortune trading equities in his early 30s and built his entire firm up from that. On top of that, his wife was the daughter of a massive, heavy-hitting Texas investor. We're talking old Southern money and major political connections. They had 2 kids together. The hedge fund's website featured a slick, professional biography, a headshot of him looking sharp in a dark suit, and a breakdown of the financial sectors he managed. I sat there just staring at his photo for a minute. This was the exact same guy who had just been holding my wife's hand in a deserted parking lot. By every financial metric out there, the guy had me completely beat. He drove a newer car, worked in a high-rise office, and had the kind of wealth that opens doors I didn't even know existed. For 5 years, my life had been nothing but tight budgets and endless mortgage payments. His life looked a whole lot different. But as I sat there, none of that actually mattered. What really mattered was this. His wife was the daughter of one of the most powerful, well-connected investors in the state of Texas. If she ever found out that her husband had been fooling around with another woman for the last 6 months, she wouldn't just divorce him. She would completely destroy him. The hedge fund's dirty laundry would get dragged through open court, and every single one of his wealthy investors would find out exactly what kind of man he was. No guy running a multi-million-dollar fund wants to see his name dragged into a messy public scandal like that. So, later that evening, I walked down the hall to our bedroom to have it out with Megan. Right before I stepped inside, I pulled out my phone, opened up the voice recorder app, hit record, and slid it right into my front shirt pocket. I kept my voice completely flat and steady. "I know what's going on with you and Julian," I told her. "I saw the two of you out by your office parking lot today. Just give it to me straight. Was he the one behind the birthday roses? The random ride in the middle of a downpour? Are you sleeping with him?" Megan just looked up at me. She didn't even flinch, and there wasn't a single second of hesitation in her eyes. "Yeah, we've been seeing each other for 6 months," she said. "Honestly, I'm completely sick of pinching pennies and stressing over every single dollar just to pay off this mortgage. I want to enjoy nice things. I want to actually live my life, and if you aren't capable of giving me that, why the hell shouldn't I take it when someone else is offering?" She looked me dead in the eye when she said it, almost like she was daring me to react. It was like she'd already convinced herself that I was too weak to do anything about it. I just stood there and took it all in, listening to every single word. I didn't yell. I didn't start an argument. Once she finished venting, I just gave a slight nod and walked right out of the room. Back in the kitchen, I sat down at the table and pulled the phone out of my pocket. I hit stop and played back the first few seconds of the audio. Her voice came through crystal clear. Every single word was sharp. I already had the photos from the parking lot, but now I had something way better, her own voice, explicitly laying out exactly what she'd been doing and how long it had been going on. And she'd spilled it all without me screaming or forcing her into a corner. She just volunteered it out of pure arrogance. She thought she'd completely crushed me with that conversation. She figured my silence meant I was defeated. She couldn't have been more wrong. The next morning, I jumped onto the website for Julian's hedge fund and tracked down his office address. It was right in the middle of the financial district in downtown Houston. I dialed the main desk, told the receptionist I was a high-net-worth investor looking to move a significant amount of capital into their fund, and asked for a direct meeting with Mr. Vance. She put me on a brief hold, came back a minute later, and offered me an appointment at the end of the week. I told her that sounded perfect. For the next few days, Megan and I were like two ghosts passing each other in the house. No shouting matches, no follow-up talks about her little speech. She actually seemed totally fine with the cold shoulder, relieved. I'm pretty sure she figured I was just too broken to fight back, and that I'd eventually just swallow my pride and accept things the way they were. When Friday morning rolled around, I threw on a sport coat and made the drive downtown. The receptionist guided me straight up to his office on the 14th floor. I walked right in, and Julian looked up from his desk. The exact moment he realized who I was, his whole face shifted. He scowled and leaned back in his leather chair. "You? What the hell are you doing here?" "I'm here to talk about a pretty major deal, Julian," I said. I walked right over to the chair across from his desk and sat down without waiting for an invitation. He just stared at me with his arms crossed, his face totally shut down, the classic look executives use to shut people up before they can even start. I reached into my coat, laid my phone flat on the desk between us, and hit play. Megan's voice immediately filled the entire office. "Yeah, we've been seeing each other for 6 months. I'm completely sick of pinching pennies. Why the hell shouldn't I take it when someone else is offering?" The look on his face completely transformed the second her voice hit the air. All that corporate confidence and superiority he'd walked into the room with just evaporated into thin air. He went completely white and just stared at the phone, frozen. Julian sat there in absolute silence for a few long seconds, then slowly looked up to meet my eyes. "What do you want?" he asked. His voice was incredibly hoarse, barely keeping it together. I just looked back at him, completely calm. "I didn't drive down here to bargain with you, Julian. I came here to tell you exactly how this is going to play out. My lawyer is already putting together the divorce paperwork. Pretty soon, your wife is going to find out every single detail on her own, so you might want to start running the numbers on what that's going to do to your firm." You could see the panic moving behind his eyes. He tried to pull his executive composure back together and pivot to a different strategy. He started rambling about how the recording was illegal because he didn't consent to it, and how it wouldn't hold up in a courtroom. Then he tried to insult me, pointing out that I drove an old truck and had a mortgage I could barely afford, claiming he had the kind of endless capital to bury me in legal fees if I wanted to fight. He said it with this tone like he was completely used to people backing down the second he flashed his wallet. I didn't say a word. He waited for me to break. When I just sat there staring at him, his entire demeanor completely changed. He shifted gears and suggested we could settle this whole thing quietly, right now, saying there was absolutely no reason to involve outside parties. Then he threw out a dollar amount. I just stood up. "I didn't come here for your money," I said, and walked straight out the door. I took the elevator down to the lobby, stepped out into the humid air, and drove myself home. A few days later, Megan came home from work, walked straight into the living room, and dropped a thick manila folder right on the coffee table in front of me without saying a single word. I opened it up. It was a divorce settlement. The terms were unbelievably clean. I got the house, completely in my name, and the entire remaining balance on our mortgage was to be wired and paid off in full. I flipped through the first couple of pages and then looked up at her. "You're paying off the house? Where are you getting that kind of cash?" She stood there in silence for a moment, looking down at the floor. "Julian is paying it," she said quietly. "He told me he isn't going to risk his marriage or his business over this." She shifted her eyes away from me. "Just sign the paperwork." She didn't offer any more details, and honestly, she didn't need to. I knew exactly what had gone down. Julian had weighed his options and picked the path that cost him the least amount of long-term damage. Writing a single check was a whole lot cheaper than getting divorced from a woman whose father had the power to dismantle his entire professional career. It was cheaper than exposing months of internal financial documents to a hostile legal team, and way cheaper than letting his wealthy investors find out what he'd been up to. I took my time going through the rest of the paperwork, making sure every single line was airtight. Megan just stood by the doorframe the entire time, watching me read, looking like someone waiting on a jury verdict she already knew she was going to lose. I picked up a pen and signed my name on every single line that had a sticky tab. She took the folder back without a word, grabbed her keys and walked out the door. After that, the house went completely quiet. Just total silence. A few days later, my attorney gave me a call and confirmed that the funds had successfully cleared. That exact same afternoon, a notification popped up on my phone from the bank. The remaining balance on my mortgage read exactly $0. I sat there at the kitchen table and just read that single line over and over again. 5 long years of strict budgeting. 5 years of watching every single dime, skipping vacations, and putting every spare dollar we had toward lowering that massive number. And just like that, it was completely gone. It wasn't the way I had planned it, and it definitely wasn't the timeline I had in mind, but it was over. Not long after that, the court finalized the divorce. Megan spent about a week packing up her life into cardboard boxes and officially moved out. I never bothered to ask where she was going, and she never volunteered the information. A mutual buddy mentioned a few weeks later that she'd moved back in with her mom on the opposite side of town, but I didn't dig any deeper than that. On the night Megan took the very last of her things, I turned the lock on the front door and just stood there in the hallway for a minute. The house was completely silent. It was entirely mine now. No debt, no financial weight dragging me down, and no lies hanging over my head. On Monday morning, I got up and went right back to work. Life just kept moving forward. Dan might have lost a wife in this deal, but he walked away with a fully paid-off home and a life completely cleared of deception. Some people might look at that outcome and call it a massive loss, but I highly doubt Dan sees it that way. If you found yourself standing in his shoes, would you have handled the situation the exact same way? Drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts on how this all played out. And make sure to hit that subscribe button for more stories just like this one.